I would like to present the results of a preliminary study on attitudes toward generative artificial intelligence, or GenAI for short, in the video game development industry. We were primarily interested in whether professional experience affects how people involved in game dev view GenAI. In other words, do students, entry-level employees, so-called juniors, those with moderate experience and seniors, assess the potential and risks associated with this technology in a similar way? The game dev industry has rapidly integrated generative AI into the game development process, increasing efficiency, for example, speeding up prototyping, and in turn, companies' competitiveness. It is no longer just about experimenting with individual tools, but about providing real support for many stages of the workflow, creating 2D and 3D graphics, level design, writing dialogues, assisting with coding and detecting errors. According to the industry reports, about half game developers already report using GenAI tools in their workflows, and this percentage has risen further over the past years. The most commonly cited benefits include faster prototyping, cost reduction, and support for creativity. The rapid advancement of GenAI is fueling this trend. To illustrate, consider Midjourney, a tool that has made a qualitative leap in just 1 year. This clearly demonstrates the pace of change. Technologies that were just a novelty not long ago are now standard production practice in this industry. Our study was quantitative in nature and based on a survey. We conducted it in Poland with a sample of 175 people, including 81 students and 94 game dev industry professionals with varying length of experience. The data was collected in the first half of 2024. We wanted to find out how participants view generative AI in the context of game development. To this end, we used a very brief survey tool comprising 3 statements. The first concerned the utility of AI, whether companies using AI will gain a competitive advantage in the future. The second statement concerned the level of acceptance, whether companies should use AI as widely as possible, within the bounds of law, of course. The third statement concerned job security, whether the development of AI would more likely hurt or threaten the respondent's current or future job. We collected responses on 5-point Likert scale ranging from -2 to +2. We interpreted negative values as negative attitudes and positive values as positive attitudes. We divided the participants into 4 groups. The first group consisted of students interested in game development but who had no experience yet with the realities of working in the industry. The next 3 groups were made up of game dev professionals divided by level of professional experience. We defined lower experience as working in the industry for less than 5 years. Those with medium experience had between 5 and 10 years, and those with high experience had more than 10 years. This classification corresponds to the one commonly used in the IT industry, including GameDev, and represents fairly natural division into those just entering the industry, juniors, mids, and seniors. We formulated 4 hypotheses, which in their specific statements express the suspicion that attitudes toward generative artificial intelligence become increasingly positive with longer tenure in the industry, and thus with growing experience in video game production. The first hypothesis posited that professionals taken as a whole group would have more positive attitudes towards GenAI than students. The second hypothesis posited that less experienced professionals would be more positive than students because they already have exposure to industry practices. The third hypothesis posited that more experienced professionals would be more positive than less experienced ones. We therefore anticipated a gradual increase in acceptance from students to entry-level employees and then to the most experienced professionals. Additionally, the fourth hypothesis posited that the least experienced professionals might exhibit negative attitudes based on previous qualitative research, particularly that conducted by Boscher and colleagues regarding young game developers' skepticism toward GenAI. In summary, we assumed a gradual increase in acceptance of generative artificial intelligence, starting from negative attitude among students and junior professionals and progressing as their experience grew. Let's take a look at the results. We see three dimensions of attitudes: utility, adoption, and safety. The first dimension addresses whether AI will give companies a competitive advantage. The second, whether companies should use AI as widely as possible. And the third, whether AI is more of a support than a threat to jobs in game industry. As we predicted, people with moderate and high levels of professional experience have clearly positive attitudes toward GenAI. Students tend to be cautious. Their responses range from neutral to slightly skeptical. Most surprising, however, is the group of entry-level professionals. They are the ones with most negative attitude toward GenAI across all three dimensions, even more negative than students. This result does not align with the simple notion that the closer one is to entering the workforce, the greater the acceptance of new tools. It turns out that entering the industry can be a time of particular uncertainty. It also means that attitudes toward GenAI do not change in monotonic manner. They are neutral among students, negative among junior professionals, and only clearly positive among those with at least 5 years of industry experience. So let's take a closer look at the juniors, that is, those with less than 5 years of experience scored below average across all three dimensions. This means that this group not only has concerns about AI, but also has less confidence in its practical utility. We can therefore assume that skepticism toward the widespread adoption of AI stems in part from the belief that the technology is not yet effective enough or does not align with the values and work standards of creative industry. At the same time, fear of competition in the job market may also be a factor here. For junior professionals, GenAI may be perceived not as a supportive tool, but as an additional competitor at a time when their professional standing is still taking shape. In contrast, the groups with moderate and high level of experience are very similar. A positive attitude toward generative AI develops over the course of 5 years. This suggests that approximately 5 years of professional experience may represent a threshold for adaptation. After this period, attitudes toward GenAI stabilize and become noticeably more positive. This can be interpreted to mean that more experienced individuals have a greater sense of competence, better understand the production process, and are more readily able to recognize GenAI as a supportive tool. At the same time, their more established position in the industry means they do not view GenAI as a threat to their jobs. For them, GenAI may simply be another tool in their toolkit, much like other tools that automate specific stages of production. These findings have several practical implications for the industry. First, the implementation of GenAI should not be viewed solely as a technological issue. It is also an organizational, educational, and psychological issue. If new hires are the most skeptical group, the onboarding process should include a gradual introduction to AI tools. It's not enough to simply say, starting tomorrow, we're all using AI. Training, examples of best practices, and clear explanation of how AI supports work, rather than replacing creators' skills, are needed. Companies should also actively manage fears of job loss. If these fears are ignored, they can slow down technology adoption and reduce teams' competitiveness. On the other hand, providing good support to junior employees can accelerate the transition from skepticism to the productive use of GenAI. Professional experience is of course not the only factor influencing attitudes toward GenAI. In our previous study, we also analyzed specializations among both game dev professionals and students. The most skeptical group turned out to be artists working in the game dev industry and the students majoring in the arts. Fine arts students rated the usefulness of GenAI much lower and were significantly more opposed to the widespread use of this technology in game production than students in other fields. A similar pattern emerged among professionals. Those performing exclusively artistic tasks were less supportive of GenAI than programmers, testers, producers, or project managers. Artists in particular saw GenAI as a threat to the job market. However, the group of artists who also fulfill other roles, technical or managerial, is particularly interesting. In their assessment of AI usefulness and adoption, they were more similar to non-artists than to artists. At the same time, like artists, they still perceived a threat to jobs. This shows that attitudes toward GenAI depends not only on years of experience, but also on professional identity and scope of expertise. Our study was preliminary and based on only 3 statements. We later expanded this survey into a more comprehensive tool that we plan to publish soon. The AGAVA scale, which is an abbreviation for Attitudes Toward GenAI as a Work Associate, will help us better measure how employees across industries, especially in creative industries, perceive GenAI as a collaborator. In future studies, we aim to expand our sample internationally to enable cross-cultural comparisons. Another important context is the evolving copyright law and its impact on the acceptance of GenAI. In summary, our findings show that attitudes toward generative artificial intelligence in game dev industry do not simply depend on age or general openness to technology. The stage of one's professional career is also of key importance. Students are cautious, entry-level professionals are the most skeptical, while those with at least 5 years of professional experience view GenAI much more positively. The most important conclusion, therefore, is that adapting to GenAI is a process. For the industry, this means that successful AI implementation requires not only tools, but also support, training, and thoughtful management of employees' concerns. Thank you very much.